WNST, Tal, Luke Jones. I mean, if you don't blink, you miss these 2-hour games, right? I mean, if every baseball game were the way they played hasty baseball on Wednesday night, Commissioner Manfred wouldn't be having little memorandums, right?
Yeah, I mean, you get a 2-hour, 23-minute game, well-pitched, an understatement in regards to Dylan Bundy, and 2 home runs for the Orioles. I mean, that's the formula, right? You take that every single night, but definitely a hasty, crisp performance by the Orioles, and just enough offense. And again, the story of the night was really Dylan Bundy. He was just sensational. And hey, I guess it's Gausman and Bundy, and then pray for rain, right? Or pray for an off day at least.
Well, I mean, at least they have it this time. And you mentioned the hasty baseball part. I cut my teeth with Ray Miller. And, Ray Miller was, work fast, throw strikes, move the ball around, right? I mean, pretty simple game, right? But when you throw strikes, that does matter. I mean, and it's certainly with a lineup that kind of wants to swing the bats to begin with, it gets the games over quick, but it's even better when they swing and don't hit it or make poor contact. I mean, Gausman was dropping the ball down low, where it needs to be. And Bundy was just popping the zone for what I could tell.
Bundy was sensational. I mean, that was as impressive as he looked in his 2 or 3 best starts last year. Right? Remember when he first took the hill as a starter after the All-Star break? He had that 6 or 7 start stretch where he was really looking really, really impressive, and it was becoming an event. It was appointment TV to watch him pitch. That's how he looked on Wednesday night. And I think the biggest thing with him wasn't just throwing strikes, but he was getting swings and misses. 17 swinging strikes, which that's an impressive amount. I went back and looked. Chris Tillman had that many swinging strikes in a game once all last year, and Chris Tillman a pretty darn good pitcher when he's healthy. So I think that just speaks to how good Bundy was against the lineup that you throw strikes, but we saw on opening day, they made Kevin Gausman work. I mean, they can foul off pitches. They'll take close pitches. Bundy was just pounding the zone. And I think the biggest development in terms of the big picture was using his slider, that pitch that he shelved last year because of, he had the forearm tightness 2 years ago in the Arizona Fall League. So last year he didn't use it, really with the conscious effort of, let's keep things simple, want to get through a season healthy. He did that. He reintroduced the pitch this spring, slowly at first, and to anyone's knowledge, hasn't had any physical concerns with it. And you could see early on he had that working. His straight changeup wasn't working quite as well, and that worked out well because Toronto had mostly right-handed hitters in their lineup on Wednesday, and he used the slider a ton. That was used a lot. Fastball was fine. He was. At times in the mid-90s, at other times in the low 90s, kind of using more of his two-seamer. But you have an array of pitches like that, which, he had 4 pitches working for him on Wednesday night. I don't care who you are. If you have good stuff and, just good stuff in general, good velo, good movement on your pitches, and you have 4 different pitches that Wellington Castillo can put down, and even 5 if you're talking about using a two-seamer, you're going to be tough to beat. And I think it was very much reflective in how Toronto looked at the plate. I think it's important to point out this was the first time the Blue Jays had seen him as a starter. They'd seen him when he was a reliever earlier last year. So I think that's something that probably worked to Bundy's advantage. But the thing that I was most impressed with, besides the fact that he was getting so many swings and misses, that third time through the order, which last year he really struggled in that department. That's when we saw him give up a few too many long balls when teams were seeing him for the third time. Last night, 1 for 7 with 3 strikeouts the Blue Jays were a third time through the order seeing Bundy. So, I don't know. Yeah, could he have been better? Sure, if he pitches a complete game shutout. But in terms of where he is in his development, knowing his history, knowing the fact that he didn't really have all that great of a spring training for him to come out and pitch this way, you have to be encouraged.
Well, 7 strong, 99 pitches, didn't walk any once. They missed a lot of bats, as you'd like to say, and then got some help. I mean, a couple of early runs, a couple of home runs, Davis and Adam Jones, and and they held on to it. I mean, you would think when the score was you looked up, it was 3-1 early in the game. You're like, okay, it's third inning here, fourth inning. How's this going to play out? When are they going to get into the bullpen? It felt like Bundy never sweat, quite frankly. He never got in trouble in the way that Gausman got himself into a big jam on opening day and worked his way out of it. Bundy didn't have to worry about that.
Right, and even in the third inning when he did give up the RBI single to Devin Travis, 3 straight hits, none of those hits were hit particularly hard. I mean, it wasn't as though they squared anything up. I mean, there were maybe, I can think over the course of the night, maybe 2 balls, maybe 3 that Toronto hit hard. I think back to Morales in the top of the second inning hit a long fly ball to left field. That was something he squared up. Stayed in the ballpark. Joey Rickard made the catch and left. But there wasn't much authoritative contact coming off the Toronto bats against him, and that's where you know that someone's pitching well. And it was just really, really impressive to see. I mean, it's just that was the kind of stuff that we haven't seen very often, from any Orioles pitcher
right.
quite some time. We've seen
other than maybe Tillman on the right night, but it's been a little while since we've watched somebody work concisely, right?
I mean, you'd have to go back to Eric Bedard when he was pitching at his best right before the Orioles traded him to Seattle in that heist of a deal that they had. But I mean, it's just they've had good pitchers, Wei-Yin Chen, Miguel Gonzalez. It's not as though they haven't had any effective starters, but none of those guys were ever capable of being as dominant as, frankly, Bundy looked and how he looked a couple times last year. Now, I'll say this much. You're not going to have 4 pitches working every single time you go out there. I mean, Mike Messina didn't have 4 pitches working every single time he went out there. So, your stuff isn't always going to be that good, but it was just really impressive to see that. And again, to get that many swings and misses, that many strikeouts, and to not walk anyone, as you mentioned, and also first pitch strike on 19 of the 25 hitters he faced. I mean, that's just, that's the recipe for being successful, and certainly Dylan Bundy was on Wednesday.
Yeah, we were talking about that with Leo Mazzoni earlier this week. Still best pitches, strike 1 for sure. Luke Jones joining us here. Birds take off. Yankees come in. Bundy beats Happ. Blue Jays, no home runs for the Blue Jays in 2 games. That's how you beat them, right?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the difference in this game. It's not as though the Orioles killed the ball over this brief 2 games.
Only 5 hits on Wednesday night, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they only had 6 runs in 2 games, but, and I know John Gibbons said this after the game, the Orioles hit 3 home runs. They had the big home run from Trumbo, the walk-off in the bottom of the 11th on opening day, and then they get Adam Jones hits a 2-run shot in the 3rd inning, which tied him with Rafael Palmeiro for 5th place on the Orioles all-time list. Pretty impressive company for the Orioles center fielder. And Chris Davis hits his 200th with the Orioles in the bottom of the 4th. And good to see Davis go the opposite way. When you're seeing him hit those majestic flies to the opposite field, landing in the Orioles bullpen, that's a good sign. He did strike out a couple times. I mean, Chris Davis strikes out. I mean, we could continue to talk about that for the duration of his contract, and we probably will, but that's who he is. As long as he's bringing production with it, you'll live with that. So, they get the 2 home runs. Jay Happ was pretty darn good too. As much as we talked about Dylan Bundy, Happ 9 strikeouts and 0 walks over his 7 innings. Just the 2 mistakes, that was the difference. And the margin for error in these kinds of games where both sides are pitching well, it's not much. So Orioles played exceptional defense over the first two games of the season. They pitch well, and they get the home run. That's kind of, you're not always sure about the pitching part, at least the starting pitching part, but nice to see the Orioles get that kind of performance from Gausman and Bundy. And we said it, hey, this has got to be the formula, especially when Chris Tillman comes back. They need to win just about all the games that Gausman and Bundy pitch. I mean, I know it's not going to be all of them, but knowing what the rest of the rotation looks like, when you get well-pitched games like they got, Gausman wasn't great on Monday, but he was good enough against the tough lineup, and Bundy being absolutely exceptional, you have to take advantage and win those games. I mean, you can't leave wins on the field like that when you pitch that way. So nice to see the Orioles play a really good defensive baseball, and like I said, a bullpen. Even with Zach Britton looking shaky early on, you can tell he's searching for his command. Still gets the 6-4-3 double play to lock down the save in the ninth.
Well, Gaussman will go back after it on Saturday. They only needed 3 starters this week. It'll be Jimenez on Friday night against Severino as the Yankees with their tails between their legs a little bit down in Tampa. I wanted to ask you about Trey Mancini in the lineup. I know Buck is in his pre and post is giving the young man some props and certainly giving him some ABs. Wasn't the best effort for him on Wednesday night, but how much you think we see him?
It's going to be interesting because right now, I mean, they have a 5-man bench, and typically you're not going to be able to do that. I mean, you might have some times where you can, like the Orioles do right now, as you pointed out, with the off days, having 2 off days in the first week of the season has allowed them to send Gaussman out there and for on Saturday and to have a 3-man rotation. So, right now they do have those extra outfielders and allowing Mancini to cut his teeth, so to speak, in right field. I thought he looked okay on Wednesday night. Made a throw to the plate on the RBI single that was accurate. Wasn't going to get the runner at the plate, and both fly balls that went his way, he was able to handle. So I think, however long this lasts, and I'm not convinced that we won't see him in AAA Norfolk playing right field every day. To kind of get a little more acclimated to the outfield, a place that he hadn't played before this spring. But I think against left-handed pitching for now, it makes some sense. And certainly, if he can prove to be a guy who can play a solid outfield, and he's not going to be a Gold Glover, we understand that. Let's just say, can he be better than Mark Trumbo out there? Then he becomes a far more intriguing option, not just for 2017, but moving forward. I think.
And he's cheap.
Yeah. Well, hey, those young, under club control players. Look around baseball. That's the thing now. I mean, you can talk all you want about big contracts, and there are big contracts out there. I get that, but teams that are really successful. Look at the Red Sox. Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., Xander Bogaerts. I mean, those are guys making no money relative to what their value is right now. And, this has become, as much as we've always talked about it in football, baseball is more and more becoming a young man's game because I think teams are recognizing talent and saying, I want to get this guy to the big leagues, take advantage of, better defense from younger players, and certainly Boston's a great example of that. But, you take advantage of these guys that are cheap and under club control, and it just, it allows you to use payroll on other very specific needs that you have. So, in the case of Mancini, we'll see how this plays out. I'm not convinced that he sticks as an outfielder long term, but if he's going to be an Oriole for the duration, at least for the foreseeable future, that's where his role is going to be. Not going to knock Chris Davis off of first base. We see what kind of defense he plays there. And Mark Trumbo just got signed to a 3-year deal, and he's going to be the primary DH. So if Trey Mancini is going to be in the major leagues for the Orioles, it figures to be in the outfield. So, first test and the early returns on him in the spring, he looked okay. Certainly needs to swing the bat. I mean, that's the prerequisite here. That's the understood part here. And in his cup of coffee to this point, a handful of games last year, and now beginning the 2017 season, he's had his moments. There's no doubt about that. 3 home runs late last year against left-handed pitching. So his early role, however long it might be, appears that we're going to see him in right field against left-handed starters, like we saw against Jay Happ, and then they still have Craig Gentry to come off the bench to be a late-inning defensive replacement.
Well, he's had pop and he's had average everywhere he's been, right? I mean,
that's the thing. I mean, do I think Trey Mancini's going to hit 40 home runs in the major leagues one day? Probably not. I mean, it's hard to project that. Expect anyone to do that unless you're Chris Bryant coming out of being a top pick and spending minimal time in the major leagues.
He's also not 21 either. He's 25.
Yeah, and that's part of my point. I mean, he's not extremely young, so you would think his ceiling is more. Could he be a 20 home run guy in the majors? I mean, to this point, he's shown pretty good pop, and again, a very small sample size. But hey, he did everything he could in the spring. I'm not sure anyone really believed that he was going to be on this 25-man roster going, at the start of spring training. But this kid just knocked the cover off the ball throughout the spring, and I get it. It's spring training. You never want to be fooled by that one, good or bad. But when you're talking about a young player, it's something that does matter more than, talking about a guy like Adam Jones or Chris Davis or even Manny Machado at this point. So, he did everything he could to earn the opportunity, and he has it. We'll see how long it lasts. Again, the Orioles roster is going to be changing here, not just with adding Wade Miley back for Sunday's start, but they're going to need a fifth starter by the middle of the month. So, they're going to be a couple players who are on this roster right now are going to be going. So, whether Mancini sticks or not, it's still up in the air. But again, so far so good in terms of the right field experiment that we saw Wednesday night.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and of course covering the Orioles and covering the Ravens. Any fallout you want to throw at the Liars Luncheon, which year after year has become less and less interesting, other than when Ozzie slips and says something he probably shouldn't say, which may mean that Nick Mangold will be in purple by Monday, right?
Yeah, that was, when Ozzie Newsome said that it was highly likely, highly probable that they would add another free
Well, Ozzie
agent.
never gets in front of us to answer questions ever, so when he does, it's only natural that he would trip up.
Yeah, well, and the one thing we'd say, Ozzie Newsome doesn't lie. Now, he might not really be very forthcoming in terms of just wanting to talk about something, but, he's someone who's generally honest when he's asked about something, and the logical connecting of the dots on Wednesday after the Liars Luncheon where he made that comment. Well, Nick Mangold was in town visiting with the Ravens. Now, didn't immediately sign a contract, but by all accounts, sounds like it was a good visit, and we'll see how this plays out. I mean, it's very clear that the Ravens have a need at center. I know they've talked about Ryan Jensen, John Urschel. They've even mentioned the possibility of Alex Lewis playing center. But I think when you look at the history of this franchise, go back and look, they generally have relied on established veterans, whether it was bringing in Matt Burke, whether it was bringing in Jeremy Zuda after the Gino Gradkowski experiment failed. Mike Flynn certainly was their center for a long time, a guy who became an established veteran after the first couple of years. But I think Mangold's someone who makes a lot of sense if, and this is the caveat here, that ankle's healthy. I mean, it cost him 8 games last year, had been a very durable player prior to that, and there was some concern about that ankle last year with the Jets. Lots of debate whether he was going to have surgery or not, and I think that's the big key here. If he is healthy, he makes a lot of sense. Whether it's whether he's just here for a year or maybe a little bit longer. He's 33, so he's not exactly a young player, but I think he's the kind of guy, when you look at his profile, you look at how his career arc, so to speak, does remind you a little bit of Matt Burke. And Matt Burke, similar age to what, Mangold, similar age to what Matt Burke was when he signed in Baltimore in 2009. So we'll see how that plays out. Certainly nothing's official until they have the press conference and sign the contract. And we kind of saw this with Jake Long last year, another veteran lineman who, was coming off of an injury concern, and the Ravens decided not to sign him after it looked like they were going to. So we'll see how that plays out. But, beyond that, not a whole lot terribly interesting. I'll go with one tell that I'm predicting, and who knows if it's even going to matter, because I don't know if the guy's going to be there when they pick at 16. I found it interesting when Eric DeCosta was asked about wide receivers. He mentioned Mike Williams from Clemson. He mentioned Ross, the speedster from Washington. He kind of just mentioned Corey Davis in passing. He kind of put Corey Davis in the second tier with the next receivers that are kind of on that prospect list. And I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people that think Corey Davis might be the best receiver in this draft. So I just found that
he's been mocked to the Ravens by a couple people too.
Yeah. So I found that interesting that Eric DeCosta, and who knows, when you're in front of a group and you're speaking, he might have just forgotten about him for a moment, or maybe he was downplaying the Ravens' interest in.
We'll know in a couple of weeks. I mean, I love this part of intrigue. People come up to me and they're like, "Who's Ozzie going to draft?" And I'm like,
know.
"Yeah, what's he thinking?" And I'm like, "We always know what Ozzie Newsome's thinking on draft night, right? Like it's very obvious, and they do play their cards out, and you learn about their cards on those nights, right?"
Oh, sure. But the hilarious thing about it, it's one thing when they're picking sixth like they did last year. I mean, we talked about the possibility of Ronnie Stanley. I mean, was I 100% convinced they were going to do that? No, of course not.
Well, you thought Tunzel was going to be gone by then, and he wasn't.
No, but a lot of that had to do with I knew that they were ready to move on from Eugene Monroe. That much was pretty obvious. So, they couldn't do it until they had a left tackle in place. But it's much easier trying to figure out who their top 6 are or who their top 7 or 8 are. Trying to figure out, one, who their top 16 even is, and two, if it's going to turn out that way for them. I mean, that's anyone who says they know. You might find out some information here or there, but you're not going to be able to find out because they don't know who they're going to be able to draft at this point. When you have 15 other teams picking ahead of you, if there's someone that you really desperately covet, you better be prepared to move up. So, maybe that's the case. Maybe, hypothetically speaking, if it is Corey Davis that they love, I've said all along, I've talked about this with Dennis on his show as well, if there's someone that they really covet that they think is going to be a special playmaker, don't be afraid to move up from 16 to, say, 12 and get your man if it comes down to it. Make sure you get him if there's someone you really want. So we'll see if there is a player like that, or perhaps we'll see the Ravens stay true to their board, and maybe there's 3 or 4 guys available at 16 that they have rated pretty evenly, and then we see them move back a few spots. I mean, we've certainly seen that in the past. So expect anything. Well, when you're picking at 16, it's really tough to kind of just say, yes, the Ravens are going to draft player A.
There will be trades, there will be moves, there will be rumors, there will be lies. It's April. That's why we love it. Luke will be at the ballpark all weekend with the Orioles and the Yankees. You can find him at Baltimore Luke on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. I am Nasty at WNST.net. Together we're putting together the morning newspaper that ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. Dennis Kolatzis is here this Thursday, next Thursday, every Thursday. It's the SSV on WNST. It's a Sunday Sports Voice. That happens from 3 until 5 on Thursdays. And, of course, our WNST text service is there for any breaking news. Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook and waiting for the NFL schedule to come out so we can get Green Bay and Nashville and Minnesota and wherever the Raiders are playing all organized. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am a very available individual. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.